Hi, everyone. This is Stan Mallow. Welcome to Paranormal Yacker. This episode is part two of my interview with experiencer and best-selling author Terry Lovelace. I'll be yakking with him about his book, Devil's Den, The Reckoning, which chronicles a lifetime of experiences with ETs, one that includes abductions and having anomalous objects implanted in his leg by alien beings. In Devil's Den, The Reckoning, you provide candid memories from a lifetime of experiences with ETs, early childhood abductions, and your interactions with a hybrid entity you called Sue. What is your earliest memory of being contacted by and interacting with an alien being?
Around age 4. When I came out with this and disclosed this, I had some very reputable people. Jim Mann, Deb Cauble, that's the only two I can think of off the top of my head, but several people contact. And they had this similar experience. At age 4, I recall being abducted and being in a round room or oval shaped, white with a gray padded floor and a dome ceiling. And we were quizzed by Chris DiPerno, affiliated with the New York MUFON people. And this was filmed for New York MUFON. And we were asked questions about what did the room look like, and we would write out an answer on a piece of paper with a magic marker, and then we'd disclose what we wrote. And we all had the same answer. So a domed white room, we would generally have the same kids. Like the kids that I saw there were always the same, and they weren't kids that I recognized from daycare or from the neighborhood. They were unknown to me, and we were all in our nightclothes. And there was a handler there. That's my word for her. I named her Sue. I named her Sue because she reminded me of an Asian woman that lived in back of it. She was very petite. This woman was only about 4 feet tall, humanoid, and she had dark, gloss black eyes, but not overly exaggerated. They were about like a pair of Ray-Ban wrapped around. She with a wig and sunglasses, she could probably walk down the streets of Dallas and not get too many second looks. But the back of her head was kind of bulbous with a crease down the center. And that was my experience. This entity that I named Sue spoke to us all telepathically. And we were given a task. I know 4 people that can verify they had the same task, although there might be a little differences here and there, but we all had these geometric shapes, maybe 8 inches in diameter, maybe 9, and there were cubes and pyramids, globes, and just an assortment of geometric shaped objects, and they were all multicolored. I had a blue cube, and that's the only thing that I handled. Some other people told me that they had different experiences based on whether they used a different color or a different shape. My experience was only with the blue cube. I was asked to set it in front of me, and we're sitting cross-legged on the floor together, all of us kids in a swimmer circle, and Sue is there kind of encouraging us to move this with your mind. I know that sounds out there, but that's what happened. And I couldn't do it, and I was getting frustrated, and then one day the thing tumbled across the floor about 3 feet, and Sue came over and gave me high praise. What was the purpose of that exercise? I don't have a clue. And that's really one of my earliest memories. I don't have any other memories that are that unique. Usually it was just hanging out with these other kids, and we spoke amongst each other telepathically. And I know in a dozen or so times they took me, I asked Sue one day, why can't we talk like this at home? And she said, because you're not ready. Being a child, being 5 years old, I thought, oh boy, when I'm 6 or 7, I'll be able to do this, on Earth. I didn't know she was speaking metaphorically about humanity as a whole. I quizzed her. I said, well, why can't I do that here? We were on the floor. She gave me a mental image from above my body, and I could see inside my head to a thing that looked like a bean. And I guess that I found out later it's the pineal gland. And she said, that's where your thoughts originate. And she said, if one day you'll be able to, one day meaning humanity, you'll be able to communicate like that. And in retrospect, somehow she would answer my questions before I'd finish an answer. I think that's because she had that ability.
Your cousin Gerald endured his own childhood ET visitations. Regretfully, this had a tragic outcome. Could you tell me what that was? And did you and your cousin ever share your ET visitations with each other?
My cousin, I think we were about 9. We were about the same age. And he and his family would come during the summer and spend a couple of weeks with. And we would be there host. We would feed and water them and entertain them for those 2 weeks. And then the next year, we would go down to Arkansas and it'd be their turn to entertain us. And I guess that's probably how, poorer people vacationed back in the day. He came up to visit us, and I was having problems with seeing little circus monkeys in my room. Crazy, I know. They were E.T., I know that for a fact. And I think that they can appear in a way that children will find most benign. I had people email me saying that they saw orbs. One kid saw a raccoon, saw deer, they saw Disney characters, orbs of light, all kinds of that came into the room and communicated with them. My cousin Gerald was in a room he shared with two brothers. They were in bunk beds and he was in a bed off the side. And these clowns would come into his room about 4 feet tall and they would abduct him. They would take him. And in a flash of light, swirl of shadows, boom, he's having the same experience as I'm having. And he's a kid. He's scared to death. He's screaming. And this has been going on a while. My parents, I learned not to even bring the subject up because my parents took me to a doctor to find out what was wrong with me. The doctor said, well, what kind of TV is he watching? Oh, Space Ghost. You can't watch that. Got to cut that out. My poor cousin Gerald from a fundamentalist Baptist family who saw this very much as an evil manifestation in his room. And it wasn't anything to do with a nightmare or night terrors. It was an interaction with an evil entity. And the solution for that was spiritual intervention. They took this poor kid to church, disclosed his problem. He got up in front of the church and the preacher, the pastor, whatever the appropriate title is, told him, now you can't be having these kind of thoughts because that's when those demons come in. Kind of made it into his problem. Kind of made it it was his fault that he was being visited by, and it was just terrible because the poor kid felt guilty. He felt like it was his fault, and we had a long conversation. And I reassured him. I said, "Look, I don't think it's your fault at all. I don't know why they're here. I don't know what they're doing to us, but this is nothing that you initiated." And I hope that he has taken that to heart. But I think that part of his programming, I think he was programmed to believe that. Yeah, when he was 19 years old, he took his life. And absolutely tragic. I made it a point that if my children ever came to me and had these kind of experiences, that I would handle it differently.
The Reckoning gives details of an abduction from your Dallas home in 2019. Could you expand on that abduction?
The night of April 16th, 2019. I sleep, or I used to anyway. Now I use Wi-Fi earbuds. At that time, and this goes way back to Sony Walkman, I used to sleep with earphones on at night because I have some phobias. I mean, the closet door has to be closed, the curtains have on, I check the alarm, I have to check the doors every night. I have access to a firearm, like that's going to do anything. And one of the things I've always done is I listen to either symphonic music, binaural beats, or some type of meditative app at night, kind of self-hypnosis. And by doing that, I say it keeps the monsters out. I mean, it cuts the amount of nightmares that I have way down. And that, in the middle of the night, the cat jumps onto something and makes a noise. If I hear that, I have to get up. I have to turn on the light. I have to investigate it. And that means going into every room, and then I can go back and hopefully go back to bed. April 16, 2019, I wear a t-shirt with a pocket to bed. I haven't or had an old iPhone 6 since upgraded, but with a case that was a shield because I have heart disease. And I'd sleep with it in my pocket and my earbuds and, listen to some meditative app. That's how I slept. Well, on the morning of April 16th, I woke up at 5:55 a.m. and I woke up and I'm out of breath. I mean, I'm absolutely starved for oxygen, and my pulse is tachycardic. I couldn't count it. It was just steady and just like through the roof. And I told my wife, I think I'm having some kind of cardiac event. I think you should call 911. And she did. They came and they picked me up. And sure enough, I was starved for oxygen. They did an oximeter on my finger, and my oxygen saturation was like 94. And it's always 98, 99, 100. And took me to the hospital, but they gave me oxygen on the way there. And that was a huge help. And by the time I got to the hospital, my pulse rate came down. And I finally had enough oxygen. I know the drill because I've been there several times. I didn't think I was having a heart attack because I had no chest pain, but they do cardiac enzymes, a chest x-ray, and an EKG. That's what you get when you get chest pain in the ER. They did all three. They compared my EKG to my last EKG, saw no change. My cardiac enzymes would indicate if I'd had a genuine cardiac event. That was negative. Chest x-ray didn't show anything remarkable. By now, an hour later, I'm fine. I feel absolutely fine. They had me hang around around for about 6 hours for observation, made an appointment with my cardiologist to wear a Holter monitor. They thought maybe I had some kind of weird beat in my heart that threw me into some kind of incident. But they sent me home. Long and short, they sent me home. So my wife and I get home, have a normal afternoon. We have dinner, and then I did my evening routine of going for a walk after dinner. And I knew that I have a goal of a certain number of steps that I have to do every day. I live in a ranch. I still do live in a ranch house with one stair, the front step. That's how you get into the house, and that's it. There are no stairs. I told my wife I'm going for my walk. Be back in 40 minutes. I got to the street. I pulled out my iPhone and I pulled up its health app. And on my health app, it shows two things. It shows the number of steps I've made and the number of stairs. My steps taken were like 700 or something. It was negligible because I hadn't done anything that day. But for stairs, it showed that I had climbed 6 flights of stairs at 5:53 a.m. And I thought, what? Because I knew I hadn't climbed any. I knew I didn't climb 6 flights of stairs. Besides, on the second screen, it's an XY index where vertically shows space in 10-foot increments. And then horizontally at the bottom from left to right, the graph shows the passage of time. In a normal situation, if I climb 6 flights of stairs, because I can't do that in less than a minute, it would show a stair step type readout as time passes. And I do the first floor, and then the second 10 feet, 20 feet, and then the third. So I would have a stair step type readout on my app. And I didn't have that. I had one single bar. So I took it to Apple and I said, I think there's something wrong with my phone. I never climbed any stairs. I checked out my phone, no problem with my phone. My health app was working just fine. And I said, well, what does this readout mean? And the lady at Apple told me, based on this single bar, it looks like you climbed 6 flights of stairs, or your phone at least went up 6 flights of stairs to a height of 60 feet between 5:23 and 5:24 a.m. And I didn't wake up until 5:55. That's an event that I can't explain.
In 2012, a routine leg x-ray discovered 2 anomalous objects in your leg. That event was the catalyst for you to write the books you've written and to speak publicly about your experiences. What's the backstory of the anomalous objects in your leg and their significance in you deciding to write about your experiences?
Great question. I want to be clear that interaction with non-human entities, for me, and for a lot of people, it's not a one-on. It's a lifetime event. Because I worked in the law, I mean, who can you really trust? Who can you really trust? I trust my wife. Do I trust a coworker? I don't know. A coworker gets mad at me, tells somebody, tells his wife, word gets around. I never discussed this and never had any intention of discussing or writing a book or speaking publicly about it. And I retired from the state of Vermont in January of 2012, moved to Dallas, where we have adult children and grandchildren. In October of that year, I got up and I couldn't bear weight on my right knee. And I didn't know what it was. And it had nothing to do with what they found in my leg. What I had was called a Baker's. Nothing to do with baking, of course, discovered by a man named Baker. And it's benign. It's always benign. It's a small cyst that you catch, I don't know, like you catch a cold. And it's painful for 2 weeks. Then it resolves, then you're okay. That was the cause of my pain. But when I went to the ER, get all my medical care from the VA, they took some x-rays. The x-ray technician said, well, she was confused, and she took a few more x-rays. And she said, have you been in an accident of some kind or had a shrapnel wound or something? And I'm like, no, I've never had any injury to that knee other than skinned knee as a kid. She asked the radiologist to come down and take a look. And I thought that was a little unusual because I know that the normal drill is they take some x-rays, doc looks at them in the ER, makes a preliminary diagnosis, and they throw those films into a stack to be read by a radiologist at their leisure and issue a radiology report, unless it's something emergent, a week later. So I thought it was unusual to have a radiologist come. So he comes down and he says, I don't see any fracture or anything wrong with your knee, but you have 2 artifacts in your knee. And I said, well, can I see them? Can you show me? They are my films. He said, sure, no worries. And he pops them up on a box and he pointed to the object above my knee. And that's a structure that's square and about the size of a fingernail with 2 wires attached. And he says, this is clearly a man-made object. And he said, somehow this got under your skin and into your fascia and it's underneath your skin. He said, probably in an accident or something. And I said, well, I've not had an accident. He said, well, sure you. He says, you're going to have a scar there because he said, his words were, it's not possible to violate the integrity of the skin and have some object like this implanted in your body and there not be a scar. So we got in this little back and forth about whether or not I had a scar. So I took off my pants and he examined my knee and I don't have a scar. Never had a a scar. He was obviously disturbed by that. And I asked him, I said, Doc, let me ask you, how often is it that you find a foreign object under the skin and there not be a corresponding scar? And he said, never. He said, I've been a radiologist for 23 years. I can't account how this thing got into your body. And when he said that, the thought, it validated the thoughts I've had for years of these things putting their hands on me. That was hard for me to process. That triggered an uptick in nightmares and kind of brought this whole thing to the surface. And then he showed me the second film, and in the calf muscle of my right leg, there's a collection of what looked like bone. He said on x-ray film, these things look like they are the consistency of bone. And they're arranged in a symmetrical pattern, kind of a floral design with a little thing in the middle. And I said, well, what are those, Doc? He said, well, they're the consistency of bone tissue. And he says, it's rare, but I have seen bone tissue sprout in the middle of a muscle before, but never in multiple pieces and arrange themselves in a symmetrical pattern. He said, I don't know. I went home with a pair of crutches and some Tylenol. I wasn't really worried about my leg. I believed them that it would get better in weeks, and it did. But the x-ray really troubled me. Something a little bit unusual. They issued a radiology report. I have access to all of my medical records by computer on a program called My Healthy Vet. So if you're a patient of the VA hospital, you can access your lab results and your x-ray reports within 24 hours. They should be posted. I looked up my x-ray report by the radiologist, and he mentions two anomalies above and below my knee, and then described, and he gave impression abnormal knee. That radiology report was up, and of course, my printer didn't work. I couldn't make a copy of it. And I really, really wish I'd made a copy of it, because a week later, that radiology report was gone. And a radiology report that came up in its place was issued by a different radiologist. And it said, no disease or fracture process is seen, never mentioned anomalies above or below my knee, and gave impression, rule out Baker's cyst. I know enough about medicine because I've represented I've done some medical law work. And I know enough that if you're going to issue a subsequent, it's got to be marked as a subsequent report. You can't just disregard the first radiology report, no matter if you dislike it or not. It's got to remain. And the second report, it has to indicate that it's a subsequent report. It's report number 2. And this did not. I petitioned to get a copy of my medical records, which is my right, and kind of gave me a runaround for about 90 days. And I finally went to the records department of the VA and asked to speak to whoever was in charge. And I said, look, I've been trying to get these medical records for about 90 days now. You've had enough time. I'm a lawyer. I know what I'm doing. I'll go to the federal court in Dallas and I'll file a lawsuit, and it costs me $90. I can give me a piece of paper and a crayon. I can write a complaint. I'm going to take you to court, and I'm going to raise a lot of hell, and I'm going to go to the press, and this is going to be a big deal. The next day I had copies of my medical record. Well, what's curious is I know that they took probably 25 x-rays of my leg. I got 3 images and was told that the other images weren't saved because they were poor quality. At least I got copies that show anomalies above and below my knee.
Should viewers of Paranormal Yacker want to buy Incident at Devil's Den, A True Story, and Devil's Den, The Reckoning, how can they do that?
My books are on Amazon. They're available in Kindle, in paperback, with some images in the back, and they're also available as an audiobook that I did in my own words, for better or worse. And you can also see some of the images if you go to terrylovelace.com, and I believe there's still a working link on that to take you right to Amazon. The books aren't together. You have to search for The Reckoning, but it's in there. Yeah, take a look at it. You buy them or listen to them. I hope you enjoy them.
Terry Lovelace, I thank you for being my guest on Paranormal Yacker. I wish you success with your books.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to share my story with your audience.
I'm glad you did. Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Stan Mallow, the Paranormal Yacker. I hope you enjoyed the interview you just watched. To be sure you don't miss any interviews on my free YouTube channel, all you have to do is press the subscribe button on your screen.